All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and get started here. So I really appreciate you all making my session. I know mid-morning of day 2, we all start to kind of hit the wall, so I appreciate you making it. I hope you enjoy what I have to talk about. So I'm going to use the Nearpod application, which if you were in Allison and Claire's session yesterday, you may have already used it. But essentially what you want to do is go to nearpod.com, and there will be a section where as a student you can put in a code, and you'll want to put in LVPIW. And if all goes well, you should see my slides on your device. And I will also display them up here as well. So if for some reason you don't have your laptop or your phone, and I should mention this will work on any device with the browser as well. So is everybody getting in? Is it working? Okay, great. Okay, so my name is Jessie Bowman. I'm the Electronic Research Technology and Instructional Services librarian at Northwestern. I've been at Northwestern for, I guess, about 4 years. I worked at Valpo Law School before I moved up to Chicago. So in this presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the process of creating a chatbot. And at this point, I haven't actually launched my bot, so I've created it, kind of kept it internal. Essentially, it's going to be a web chat bot and then a Facebook Messenger bot. And as you all will see as we test it out, it's far from perfect. There's plenty of bugs. It's not a super smart chat bot at this point, but I'm pretty excited about it, and I'm eager to get some feedback from what you think. Okay, so just kind of an outline for my talk. I wanted to start out by just talking a bit about the chatbot basics and some examples. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I did find as I was researching this presentation and also researching chatbots, there was some pretty interesting stuff out there. So I'll point you towards that. Talk a little bit about why I decided to build a chatbot. The main part of my presentation, I want to actually give you a chance to play around with it, try and break it, which you probably won't have too much trouble doing. But then also talk about what I think are some potential uses, but also some potential weaknesses of these tools. Okay, so I wanted to start out with just a quick poll question, asking you which of the following describes your experiences with chatbots, and you can select none of these are multiple options, but I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of see where we're all at this point. Okay, great. So it looks like we're, the largest number of us have actually used them on websites, so that's cool. I found that I started using them more. You know, I think by default I used to see the little pop-up come up on the screen and just minimize it out of habit of thinking, oh, I just don't like dealing with pop-ups. But I have started using them more myself, and then we have, several people have responded either they've seen one before and don't use it, or they would prefer to just talk with a human, which I think that's totally understandable as well. But okay, so what is a chatbot? And you can find a million different definitions. This was one I just pulled from the Techipedia website, but it describes it as an AI program that simulates interactive human conversation by using key pre-calculated user phrases and auditory or text-based signals. So they're frequently used for basic customer service and marketing systems. Sometimes they're included as intelligent virtual assistants and operating systems. And sometimes you'll hear them referred to as chat robots, chatterbots. There's a bunch of different terminologies. But essentially you can think of it as something that is intended to kind of replicate human conversation but is automated and based on code. Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but kind of just taking a couple steps back, I think it's interesting to think about that really kind of the genesis of all of this was going back to Alan Turing and his paper in 1950. The paper was called Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence, and if you've seen the movie The Imitation Game or read it all about Alan Turing, essentially in this paper he posed the question, can machines think? And there's the idea of the Turing Test, where essentially you'll have two people in a room and then like an interviewer and interrogator outside the room. In his original instance, one of the two people in the room, one was a man, one was a woman, and they were trying to get the interrogator to guess which was the man and which was the woman. One of the people was being truthful, one was lying. So the idea was, can this third party guess which is which? So he came up with the idea, well, what if you replace one of these, either the man or woman, with a computer or a machine? Can the interrogator guess which one is the machine? And that's the basic idea with the Turing test, and these chatbots, the ultimate goal is to be able to get that person to not know whether it's a human or a machine that it's talking with. There's speculation on if anything's ever passed the Turing test. I read something in 2012, I can't recall the example, but is regarded as maybe the first thing that actually passed the Turing test. Mine definitely would not. You would immediately know it's not a human. But I thought this was interesting to kind of think about. You track it forward to 1966 if you've ever read about Eliza. This was kind of like the first chatbot. It was set up by a guy at MIT. Essentially, it was in the form of like a psychotherapist where, they would put basic inputs, and some of the examples they give is someone would type, oh, I went on a boat ride yesterday, and then it would respond, well, what do you think about boats? Or it was very basic, and a lot of times just kind of taking the keywords and putting them back in the form of a question. And you all will have these slides, so I put these on my presenter page, but there is actually a mock-up online where you can go play with Eliza. They've released the original code. As you can see in this screenshot, I tried to tell it that I was nervous about this presentation. It wasn't super helpful. It's not going to put my human therapist out of business anytime soon. But it's kind of interesting to play with and just to kind of see, back in 1966, this is what we were working with. Advance it now, and we have Siri or Alexa, so how far it's advanced. Back in the early 70s then, there was Pari or Perry, I'm not sure how you pronounced it. That was by a scientist out at Stanford. And essentially he designed Perry as, it was supposed to be a paranoid schizophrenic, was the model. So there was kind of you can read about it online, but there was an interesting story where they paired Perry and Eliza together, the therapist and the paranoid person, and they kind of got in this endless loop, and it's interesting to read about. Now you advance it forward to the mid-90s, and there was Alice. So Alice still exists. It was based on this artificial intelligence markup language that's now public source and has been translated into Ruby and Python and all these different programming languages. So, and if you've ever seen the movie Her by Spike Jonze, he said that this was kind of the inspiration for that. But I thought an interesting example, now this was actually the first really internet-facing chatbot, so this was where people could actually get on and converse with it over the web. So the University of Nebraska at Lincoln Libraries back in the early 2010s built a chatbot called Pixel. It's still in action, and in the next slide I'll give you a second just to play around with it. I can't tell if they're still updating it. I get the sense they're not because some of the links are broken on the website. But I thought it was a pretty cool actually application of how libraries might be able to use this technology. So you should now on your device be able to get over to Pixel, and I'll give you just a couple minutes to play with it and see what you think. What do you think? Are you getting any answers? Is it working?
Getting responses?
Yeah.
Yeah. Partially responsive.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not so responsive responses.
Mine's hostile.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
No, I'm not looking for a person who works in the library.
Yeah, you know, and I found, I mean, it's fairly primitive, obviously, but in terms of answering basic questions of, you know, what hours are the library open, or can I bring food into the library?
We're displaying a directory when I didn't ask for that.
Okay, yeah, we're giving
I
you
asked for a plumber. Like instead of trying to find a plumber, and I got, that is good news!
Okay, okay, yeah, that is good news.
I asked again for suggestions, and it's interesting because it actually directed me to the collection, suggested I could do an image search, a content DM, or a keyword search, and then it took me and gave me an image of the search finding a plumber in Encore.
Wow.
And which I was not expecting.
Yeah.
And then like a link into a search in Encore. So that's
Much better than what I got. I told it I needed to find a contracts court case, and it said, here, you can go to this site to find a list of people in the building and then display the directory for me.
Okay.
I asked for a Westlaw password and got off-campus information.
I asked to cite a court case, and it said, let me check Google. The answer is 0.
Okay. Okay.
It's very good at telling you where all the bathrooms are.
That's, I found like basic kind of access questions and bathroom. It was, yeah, that was more how I tested it.
I got a 404 error.
Oh, gee, okay. So you can see, you know, mixed results, but I think, you know, pretty innovative, and this is also going back several years. I think this was 2012 or 2013. So just an example, and you know, what I'll show you with mine, I think it's kind of in the mold of this in terms of the type of questions you can ask it. Okay, and then looking at some examples of more modern chatbots, a few that I found on the Go Army website, they have Sargent Star, which is really neat. If you go on there, it's a pop-up interactive conversational assistant where you can ask things like, you know, how long is my commitment if I join the Army? And he will give you an answer, and then he'll point you to and bring up the section of the website that contains that information. So, you know, again, I think a lot of it is just kind of leading you to information that's already on the website. It's not necessarily generating a lot of original content, but might be a good way to kind of get people around the site. So on the flip side, you may have read about this a couple years ago, but Microsoft released its Tay Twitter bot, which the idea was that it was supposed to replicate the conversation of a millennial teenager, and the idea was to try and learn how young people converse and interact. But they made a mistake in that Tay was able to learn from what people said to it and respond to what they said. So, not surprisingly, it's the internet. Within 12 hours, Tay had been turned into a Nazi sex-obsessed bot, so they had to take it down. They did make the point that aside from, you know, the awfulness of that, it was kind of an indication that it was programmed well and that it did learn really well from, I think that was Microsoft's spin on it. But you can see, you know, kind of the downside of these bots. But then also just in terms of different uses, so sales and marketing, I found Whole Foods, for example, if you go on their Facebook page and if you send them a message, they have a really good conversational assistant that can help you locate a store, can help you locate specials or recipes. Similarly with Fandango, you can find movie times in nearby movie theaters. You know, I did see also, and there's been quite a bit of write-up on this, therapy bots, so much more advanced than, you know, what I showed you earlier with Eliza, but there's actually a service called Wobot, which is really neat. So it's not cheap. I think it's $39 a month, but it's essentially, you know, it's not supposed to, you know, they disclaim, I mean, it's not HIPAA compliant. It doesn't replace an actual psychologist or psychiatrist, but it checks in with you. You know, you can converse with it, tell you you're stressed out. and it will kind of counsel you. At this point, I read it's getting 2 million messages a week and has gotten something like $11 million in seed funding as well. So it's been a pretty big product. There's a company called X2AI which developed this Kareem chatbot, which spoke Arabic, and it was geared towards Syrian children in refugee camps, and would kind of talk with them. So you see some of the neat applications. And then also in the access to justice arena, in legal services, there's a service called VisaBot, which you can do either on their website or on their Facebook Messenger, ranging anywhere from like $99 to $159, but it can help you get a green card, extend, I think it's your H-2B, or change your H-2B visa. There's a lot of different services. You know, it explains it's not legal advice, but an interesting application nonetheless. Okay, so kind of transitioning to why did I want to build a chatbot? Well, a couple of different reasons. So one is that I'm really interested in legal technology. I teach a legal technology course at Northwestern, and love going to these conferences and reading the blogs and doing all this. And chatbots and expert systems have had a big impact in the legal technology sphere. You might have read or seen Joshua Browder's chatbot. So essentially, I think he's still only 22 years old and still at Stanford. But when he was 19, he developed this Do Not Pay app, which is essentially was a chatbot that helped people get out of parking tickets. And up to this point, I think it's gotten 400,000 tickets invalidated and something like $9 million in parking fees. It's free to use. He's expanding it to other services as well. You can go to, I think it's, donotpay.com, and it's kind of in flux. Sometimes it works better than others, but you can use it for potentially landlord-tenant issues. I know he wants to move into doing like simple non-contested divorces through the chatbot. Again, I don't think even he would argue it's an entire substitute for hiring a lawyer, but for people who can't afford a lawyer or don't get one for one reason or another, might be a good tool. And then also just kind of more generally, something I'm really interested in is this idea of expert systems and kind of building knowledge into an automated tool. So you may have seen products like Neota Logic or here at Cali, A2J Author, for example, or even a more simple tool, Q&A Markup, where essentially you can build these automated systems that walk people through a process and either give them some sort of answer, generate a form, that sort of thing. Okay, and then also, personally, I was just kind of looking for a project or a creative outlet. So last year, I was kind of feeling some burnout towards just teaching and some of the things I typically do. So partly searching for creative outlet, partly probably procrastination from preparing for teaching, but I was looking for something new to work on. So just about this time, I went to the Clio conference down in New Orleans last September, and I heard a guy speak, Tom Martin, who has founded this LawDroid company, and essentially what his company does is they develop chatbots for law firms. So you can check them out online, but he ran through kind of the process, made it sound interesting and pretty attainable. So as I started researching these more, I found that the Law Library of Congress has a chatbot. It's really cool. If you go on their Facebook page and send them a message, you'll see it resembles like what we saw with Pixel, but it will walk you through, in this case, more legal topics, so how you can do legal research. A lot of it is it points you towards the Law Library of Congress's research guides or actual legal information. So it's really cool. And then similarly, you might have seen, and I know she's doing a presentation at AALL, but last year, or the original AALL Innovation Tournament, one of the winners was someone who developed an attorney-facing chatbot for her law firm. So I haven't been able to actually play around with the chatbot yet. It was more, I think, of from what I understand, kind of more of a demo or a markup, but it got me thinking, okay, obviously this is something maybe librarians could do. Okay, so building Lex. My first step really was to just think, what are my goals for this tool? When I was trying to think about what would I want to incorporate, I really was interested in what are some of these common questions and requests we get at the reference desk or at the cert desk. I knew that partly because I would rather do these sorts of interactions in person, and partly because I knew my programming skills are limited. But I didn't necessarily want to build anything super complex, but I more wanted to automate, some of the basic questions about, what are the hours? How do I find the list of research databases? That sort of thing, which in a perfect world, I'd much rather they would come to the reference desk and ask us, but for one reason or another, whether we're closed, whether they don't come to the library, they're not comfortable interacting, whatever, I thought it would be a useful resource. Also, which of these can be automated, and then also, what are my limitations? Again, to say I have moderate HTML skills is generous. I'm really rusty on it. I certainly don't know Python or anything more complex, so I knew I needed to probably use somewhat of a code-free tool. Okay, so then I needed to actually find the correct tools. Partly what Tom Martin mentioned in his presentation, and then partly just from doing my own research, I found two really good tools, one called FlowXO and one called ChatFuel, and those are the two that I ended up using. So FlowXO, it has a free version, which I started out with. Then it's $19 a month. So, it's definitely, if you look at it over the course of the year, that's $250. So it's not nothing, but, I thought for $20, I'll play around with it a month. If it's not worth it, so be it, I'll cancel it. ChatFuel is free, so they do have a pro version, which is $30 a month. I find a lot of times with the pro versions is that you can add more features. You also can add your own branding. So for FlowXO, by paying the money, I was able to put on, some more unique custom branding as well. I should mention too, FlowXO, you can build bots for the web, for Facebook Messenger, for Slack. I see a lot of people are putting these on their Slack channels. But I found the interface for a Messenger bot to be pretty confusing. So I just use FlowXO for my web bot, and then I use ChatFuel for the Messenger bot. ChatFuel's, I think, really easy to learn. FlowXO, not so much. But I'll show you the back end in a minute. So step 3 was just trial and error. Like I mentioned, I found that FlowXO was honestly pretty tricky to learn. I found that the help materials on the site weren't all that great. So it was definitely the sort of thing where I would work on it for a while, get annoyed, put it down for a couple days, come back to it. But it is rewarding when the light bulb goes on and it kind of makes sense. And I found that there's actually a community site on the FlowXO website where there's discussion boards and people walk you through how to do these things. So I found that was actually really, really helpful. And then also, like with a lot of these tools, there's some great YouTube videos as well. So I use those as kind of my instructions for building the tool. And then finally, I just emailed my colleagues, asked them if they'd take a look at it, try and break it, and see how it goes. So at this point, it should, if all goes well, load on your device. And this is my web bot. Is it coming up? Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so just to play around with it, and let's see what you think.
Are you getting data as we type this in?
No.
That's too bad.
Well, on the back end, so you can see what the interactions are, but I'm not seeing anything.
some pretty tough questions there.
Can anyone restore the study room? No. Is Tom around? Got the directory.
Okay.
I tried to find out if you had Hein. Got nowhere.
Nothing. Okay.
Eventually figured out how to get access to Westlaw passwords.
Okay.
It's good. I kept asking for a plumber, and it just kept telling me, like...
I don't, yeah, I sent you back to the main menu.
Yeah, main menu.
Can anyone reserve a study room? I don't understand. What do you understand? Hi there, I'm Lex.
Yeah, right.
However, when I did say, where is Jessie, it offered me the directory.
Okay.
I did find you, but of course the directory did not tell me exactly where you are right now.
Right. Right. Well, and to an extent, it is somewhat dumb AI in that a lot of it is going to be tied to keywords. So, you know, it's not, I guess as we saw with that Tay example, you know, maybe it's a good thing it can't necessarily learn and guide its responses off of what people type in, but it is going to more look for certain keywords and then point you towards something. Yeah?
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
To add. I typed in, I need an attorney, because at my school,
Yeah.
our chat function, lots of people find it when they're looking for legal help, and they'll ask, I'm looking for an attorney, and we have to tell them manually, we're a law school, we don't have attorneys here, you should go to the county bar association lawyer profiles to find someone who will file for you.
That's super helpful, because that is, even with my initial feedback, somebody brought up the point of I just added the locker one, you know, reserving a book locker, because that's a question we get all the time. But that's a great point about, you know, we could easily point them towards maybe the Cook County Law Library or something like that. Thank you.
So I put in, where can I find a copy of civil procedure examples and explanations? And it doesn't come up with anything. Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to figure out. You know, so I don't have it synced with our catalog yet. So I more have it where, you know, if someone clicks the button for, like, I'm looking for a book or article, it will show them how to get to the catalog. I haven't figured out yet if it's possible to kind of overlay it with the catalog. That would be ideal if I could. Yeah.
So we have a human chat function, and you can see what students are looking for in the back end of that. So what I commonly see is that students that are doing journal polls just copy and paste the whole citation. So I tried that with the chatbot and didn't understand what I was doing.
Yeah. So you put in the citation, right?
Yeah, I used an MLA citation because that's what I found faster than a law citation. But I don't know if it would even be possible if it could see, like, a certain punctuation setup and then figure out that that was a citation.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, even putting, you know, at a bare minimum, if somebody puts in the word cite or citation, it could give them guidance, you know. That is somewhat of the frustration with building this, is I know just with my own limitations, it limits how useful I can make it. And to that point also, we do have, you know, we have the libchat as well. So as I'll talk about, that's kind of something I'm struggling with, is how much is this helpful and how much would this take people away from that? But that's helpful, yeah. Yeah?
I noticed when I was trying to find, I said, how do I find a book? And then you have that image with the use books, images, and more to find materials of it, and then the blue and the pink circles.
Right.
It's not like the, I'm sorry, the link for both the circles takes you to the exact same place, and I didn't understand immediately from those two circles that you're supposed to use the drop down, that books, articles, and more is an option besides and use search.
I see. Let me actually go to that one right now, just while we're. Let me bring this up here.
Okay, so you said, remind me again, you went to the book.
I picked ones like use new search. Like I started off, I said, how do I find a book? Was just my question.
Gotcha,
And then it's
okay.
like, do you want to do this? And I said, yes.
Gotcha, okay.
So both of those two circles take you to the same page.
Oh,
It's completely identical.
right.
You have to use the drop down.
That's a good point.
So telling people to pick the drop down might.
Yeah, it's kind of misleading. What I did was I just took like a screenshot of our from our web, but you're right.
Yeah.
That makes it look like they're two different.
Yeah.
And well, this is a great example of how I think when you're sitting in your office, things make sense, and then you out in the wild, you realize like it's not.
Especially for people who don't know what NU search is or new search. Like if that's
Right.
like a Discover platform.
Exactly.
That's a different thing, and like, but they're not going to know what that means.
That's yeah.
Would this bot be on 24/7, or would it automatically switch on when reference closes, or on a holiday or something?
Well, that's a great. So it would be on 24/7. Though when we're sitting at the reference desk, our reference librarian logs on to the lib chat option, so that's on there as well. But yeah, this would be 24/7. So that was kind of my thinking behind this, was that if nothing else, at midnight somebody needs to find the databases and they can't find it on the website. This might give them a fighting chance of doing it, you know.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's really helpful. So let me show you briefly what it would look like on Facebook as well. So let me, oops, sorry. Okay. So if we go into and I have to just run this like a test of it because I haven't actually launched it yet. But I can show you what it would look like. And it'll make me sign into Messenger. Okay. So, reload this again. Okay, so what it would look like is if somebody on our Facebook page clicks send a message, they would get, this would be what they get. Now, one disadvantage of the chat fuel model is you can't put in a bunch of those shortcut buttons. You can put in a couple, so I worry about, again, you know, things make sense to me that I would type it that way, but I worry, will somebody know to type it? But just as an example, I think this works if we type in like Hein Online. So at a minimum, it would give us give them links to our databases page, you know, to the Greater Northwestern University databases, or have the option to start over. Something else I find a common question we get is people can't remember their Westlaw password. So if you type Westlaw, so it gives them some instructions. One cool thing if they're on a mobile device, so it actually has it set up where from their phone they could just call the Westlaw helpline, or call Lexis or call Bloomberg Law. So, you know, definitely nothing super sophisticated, but you know, but maybe again just kind of a good starting point for what they're doing. Okay, so let me now. That's super helpful. Let me show you a little bit of what it looks like on the back end of these sites. So this is the chat fuel. This is our dashboard, and a couple things to show you. So when you first create a bot, you have the option to name it, to put in, you know, your welcome text. because I have the pro version, I'm not sure if it's worth $19 a month, but I put in the scales of justice rather than the chat fuel logo. But what is kind of neat about it also, so this was the link that I put into the Nearpod presentation, but you also have the option to either embed it in the actual website or create on your website. You can just put in the little snippet of code and it will have, chat with Lex, the PLRC chatbot. So you have different options for how you would want to implement it. Now, to show you kind of how these are set up, so it's based on these processes called flows. And essentially what you do is, so if we want to create like kind of a whole new use of this chatbot, and I'll show you as an example the research help one. So you start out and you give it a trigger. So what I did is I say, all of these different phrases, so research help, contact a librarian, law librarian, librarian, research librarian, are going to trigger this particular phrase. What it does is the very first one you put in, that will be if you tell it to create a shortcut. So the actual shortcut you're going to see in the main chatbot window is research help. Okay. So then what you do, the first step is you tell it you want it to, once this flow is triggered, you want it to ask the user a question. So this is where I kind of put in my paragraph or so about the different ways that you could do research, and you give it these different shortcut buttons. So I gave it research guides, FAQ page, or email reference. You can also set up where on this page, if it doesn't recognize what the user enters, you can customize the menu, the message it will give someone. So that's where I put in, I'm sorry, I don't understand, type menu to start over. I figured at a bare minimum that will at least get them back to the main page and they can start over. But what I found to be kind of then confusing about it is it has these, it calls them cards, and the cards are the either images or external URLs that you want the person to be able to go to. And the way you activate these is you have to put on these filters where essentially, this was again something it took me a while to figure out, but you can filter these based on previous responses. So again, I think that once you learn the system, it makes sense, but it is kind of confusing, or maybe I'm just not super sharp with this stuff. I hope maybe you'll have better luck if you try it. So that's the basic setup, but I did want to make sure and show you a couple different things. So on the analytics page, if we can get it to load here, try the interactions instead. So you can go in and you can actually see the different interactions that people have put in. And I wish I could get the analytics to work, because you can see like what are the most common phrases people enter, what are the most common shortcuts that people use. Yeah, it looks like it's getting errors. It's not that important, but basically just know that there is like a whole analytical backend, which I think, if nothing else, I think this could be kind of a useful way to test out your website, because to me, if I can see, well, people are more than anything else asking about the access policy or the hours, maybe that tells us like we need to have those more prominently displayed on the website. I'd like to think that it could do more than that, but that could be a cool potential use of it. You can get those same sorts of analytics on ChatFuel as well. One other one, just before I forget, I wanted to show just one other option. On the bot. Now, when you're setting up these flows, they do have a lot of like pre-canned applications you can build in and then customize. So one that I thought potentially was useful is it has an appointment booking feature, and I just kind of cribbed that just as an example of what you could do. And again, I don't have this perfected by any means, but if someone were to type, I just made it something easy that I would remember. But you can set it up where, say, great, you want to make a research appointment, let me ask a few questions. So please put in a few dates and times. So let's just say like, June 12th at noon. We'll just say Jessie. Let's see. And then what it will do, in my email now, I actually get an email that has that basic information and says someone wants to set up a reference appointment. Again, I think the version we have through our lib chat is much more sophisticated, and I don't want to cannibalize that, but that's just another example of how you could potentially use something like this, maybe if you didn't have a more sophisticated ticketing system. And we can see, yeah, there I just got like, a basic basic information I entered. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation here. Okay, so some potential uses I see for this tool. One is, again, just automating the basic processes and responses. I don't think you have to get super sophisticated, but providing some of that basic information that people are commonly looking for. Again, I think if nothing else, just evaluating the usability and design of your website, seeing what are people searching, because I'm sure you all have the same experience where a lot of the questions we get at the reference desk, like I know that info's on the website, but sometimes I think, well, maybe I just know it's in that page and maybe people wouldn't think to look there, and that's why they're asking. So it could be useful for that. You could potentially use it for intake for more complex requests. So, again, setting reference appointments, that sort of thing. And then I think importantly, engaging patrons where they are and where they're comfortable. Again, my guess would be, maybe if we did Google, or if we polled law students, I would guess probably just as many, if not more, would say they do use chatbots. Plus, as we know, they're pretty frequently on mobile devices, and I think these work really well with smartphones and obviously with Facebook Messenger as well. So maybe it's just another opportunity to reach them where they are. So there are some potential challenges, though. One is just the time and money cost of building these. Again, not that $19 a month is insurmountable, but when you think about it over the course of a year, $250, I mean, it's definitely something, right? And I think the reliability concerns, obviously at this point, I wouldn't trust this bot to do anything super sophisticated, so you worry if you don't necessarily understand all the code behind it and you're relying on it, do you run the risk of maybe things fall through the cracks, right? And then also, probably my biggest concern is, I don't want to, if we have good tools in place, I think this has potential, but I don't want to pull people away from our lib guides or our lib answers or other tools that we already have. So I think that would be kind of a trial and error process to see. I think in a perfect world, it would just be just like another avenue to help them, but the last thing I want to do is make them not find our lib guides because of my bot.
Can I?
Yeah.
Ken Hirsch, can I?
Yeah.
Some comments on that from my experience as a consumer in the customer service field. And I think that's a good idea, because what I find when I'm on websites is generally when I'm looking to solve a problem, I'm a sophisticated user, and the chatbots are aimed at tier 1 support for people who really have no clue of what the nature of the problem is. So I think chatbots, both in that environment and this environment, are great if they're one tool that a user can self-select, whereas a more sophisticated user is likely going to want to go either directly to the tool they know they want, or the only way they're going to get the answer they want, a timely answer, is with human interaction.
That's a great point, right? Because I think they could be useful, but they run the risk of driving someone crazy who knows what they're doing, right? I think that's a great point. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I opened this board up. If you did have any questions, you're welcome to type them in here. But does anybody have any additional questions or comments, concerns? Yeah, Claire.
The two tools that you showed for building chatbots, do they come at all preloaded with things that you could adapt to your own uses?
And that's a great point. So they do. I should mention, these things are designed. I mean, some of the examples they have are like banks using them to quote people on financing rates for mortgages. I mean, so they have like some pretty complex stuff built in there. So yeah, there certainly is. I wanted to, kind of figure out how to do it myself. So I tried to build them on my own. But things like the, booking that reference appointment, there was a process in there that I could just kind of substitute in our text and then take some of the steps out. So there are. And it does have a lot of good conversational stuff built in as well. So even if you, build the processes, but then you want to just make it more conversant and almost kind of human-like, it has that too. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
There's a question.
Oh, there. Boy, I think you do. So I'm still paying for it. But I think, yeah, they're going to shut off. They're going to shut off a lot of that stuff. So I should mention at this point, with the $19 a month, you get up to 15 either bots or flows. So it treats them as the same. And I think between my bot and my flows, I think I've used maybe 12 at this point. But with the free version, you only get 5. So you're pretty limited in what you could do. So yeah, my guess would be, it would. I don't know if it would just arbitrarily turn some of them off or not, but it'd be something important to keep up with for sure. Yeah. Yes.
It looks like the flows are just looking for keywords in the string. Are you able to exclude keywords? I had 2 keywords in a query and it pulled up 2 messages because it wasn't sure what I was trying to do.
You can. I haven't admittedly figured that out yet, but I know exactly what you're, and that's why it's kind of artificial that I made that one flow triggered by appointment, because I think a lot of times somebody might type research appointment.
That's exactly what
But as I did that, it also brought up the research help thing, and I couldn't figure that out. So I know you can, I just haven't perfected it yet. Yeah. So I would say I worked on this on and off for about a month. Definitely not every day or not for hours every day, but I would guess maybe 15 to 20 hours I put in on it, something like that. I think though, of those 15 to 20 hours, I'd say 13 or 14 were spent just fumbling around, and then once I actually figured it out, you can kind of crank these things out pretty quick. So yeah, not insurmountable, but at least with my abilities, it wasn't something I could just pick up and do right away. Now, I did find though that the chat fuel is really easy to build. Essentially, with that, I was able to take in a lot of the work that I'd done from FlowXO and just plug it into chat fuel. And that one, they advertise as, build a chatbot in 10 minutes, and it is much more user-friendly for Messenger. So I'm happy someone asked that. So that is actually something for my legal tech class. One of the options I gave my students was to build a bot, and I should have listed that on my motivations for learning this. Also, one of them was if I was going to ask them to do that, I better learn how it works too. But I did find one student in particular built a pretty interesting bot on helping people with sexual harassment issues. I think with a lot of these expert systems, it works really well with claims that have, that you can kind of think of as like a decision tree, because you can truly have it where based on one response it goes one way, based on a different response it goes another way. So yeah, I think that's a great, another one I didn't use, but I've seen used is Q&A markup. And if you were looking to have your students build kind of a basic chatbot, that's another great, that's a free tool that they can use as well. So would you do a call education? Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. That would be great.
Excuse me.
Yes.
For those of us devices would connect, if you could read the question.
Oh yeah.
Before you just answer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was yes.
Also for the benefit of the recording.
Sure. So this was, so would you do a call educational session to show the rest of us? Yes, I would love to. That sounds great. Yeah.
So to the extent, you kind of addressed this, to the extent that it's answering like basic questions, hours and stuff like that, what would you say the time and effort to create this versus just having a decent FAQ page? I mean, there's just a different route of accessing the same information. Just the sense from your time and effort put into it, whether it's worth it?
So I think, yeah, it definitely takes more time than just building a good FAQ page. In fact, I think it helped having our FAQ page to kind of help me identify what are good questions to ask. So that is honestly something I struggle with a little bit, is it totally worth it? I think now having it, assuming it doesn't prevent people from finding our FAQ page, I think it would be another good way they could get that info. But I agree. I mean, I think at a minimum, a good FAQ page would be really useful.
Follow-up. Are there categories of information you think are more appropriate for the chat box versus an FAQ page? That might be.
So some of our like on our FAQ page, I mean, some of the questions might be like much more research specific about finding an authenticated constitution from an African country or or something like that. That's a little. I mean, I guess maybe I could build that into the bot, but I think anything that's more sophisticated like that, I would probably use on the FAQ page. Plus, I think that might be a little better indexed with Google as well. So somebody can maybe find that via Google. Whereas this, I would probably stick to the more. If somebody's looking to the page of our research databases, but kind of keep it at that level. But I was having a conversation with someone too. I think it's definitely not limited to library use, because this could maybe even be another good for like an IT web page as well. I thought this could be kind of a cool feature as well. Let's see, are there more sophisticated and probably expensive products out there that could be uploaded with information like handbooks and spit out responses based on that information? I'm sure there are. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but if you do, I found in researching this, I mean, there's definitely big money behind all these products, and lots of like corporations and large companies are using these. So I kind of purposely picked just some basic affordable options, but I do think, not to mention, there are companies that will build really sophisticated ones for you. For example, this LawDroid company, they build them actually for law firms and for attorneys. So if you do have some sort of budget to work with, there's always the option to go that route too, if somebody could just build you a really awesome one. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I hope it was helpful, and thank you.
Thank you, and let me know if you build anything yourself. I'd love to hear about it.